Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Business of Sports.
The business of sports can be intimidating or hard for a startup to break into.
We really appreciate when our owners are actually there, with us through the journey.
Teams, ours especially, have been very intentional to diversify at all levels of the company.
I think we're in the golden years for the NFL and college football.
Our demographic reach has continued to expand.
This is going to be really unlocking the streaming platform for sports fans.
Sports valuations are rising. We'll see when they peak.
You don't have to be the best in your sport to make a whole ton of money.
Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr.
And I'm Damian Sassower.
Scarlett Fu is on assignment. Coming up on the show, we talk to our friend of the show, Marty Edel. He is co-chair of Goulston and Storrs Sports Law Practice and adjunct professor of law at Columbia University.
Yes, Michael will get his take on the latest in college sports as NIL and sports betting continue to grow.
Maybe you have the Power Five as a place where prospective professional athletes go, and you have the other schools as having a vigorous athletic program, but perhaps not as vigorous as the Power Five.
We'll also talk footwear. We'll find out why Nike and Foot Locker are partnering up. That's right, you heard it. They kissed and made up, sort of. All that is on the way on the Bloomberg Business of Sports. But first, LeBron James media company SpringHill is still looking to turn a profit, even with a lot of popular products. For more on what's going on with SpringHill and more, we welcome Bloomberg News Media and Entertainment Team Leader Chris Palmeri. Chris, welcome to the Bloomberg Business of Sports.
Thanks.
Let's start this. Well, it's not good news for LeBron James, his media company.
Oh, come on. It's LeBron James. It's all good news.
Have you ever had a good day losing $30 million in a year?
Fair enough.
What happened here, Chris?
Well, what's happened to LeBron is happened to a lot of people in the entertainment business. There was a lot of hype about streaming and all the opportunities that folks could do creating movies and TV shows for this new generation of services like Netflix. Part of it is also a bit of a bubble in sports programming in particular. And it all ties into this whole idea of celebrities starting their own businesses.
That's right.
And it all is about, when a few people have a hit, then everybody tries to do the same thing, and it's a bubble, and bubbles often burst.
I hope you're not calling it a bubble. I mean, there's some big investors in SpringHill, right? Guggenheim. I mean, talk to us a little bit about, these fundraising rounds, right? And what the value of the company, I guess, was before we just got this release.
Yeah, I mean, in the last round, which is a couple of years ago now, but it was $750 million for what is essentially a startup. I mean, granted, tied to the one of the best sports celebrities in the world right now. But still, a risky business making entertainment. And but as we've seen so many cases, I mean, if you think about like Vice Media and BuzzFeed, and there have been so many instances of where seemingly smart big media companies even invest in these startups, and it doesn't pay off. And what's unusual about this case is that Lucas Shaw was able to get some real numbers behind the company. And we could talk about some of their projects, but, this is a lineup of shows that is not unimpressive. I mean, they were diversified. They were working with HBO, Warner Brothers. They did movies. They did TV shows. They did docs. Netflix.
Well, I mean, let's take a step back, and you're absolutely right? I mean, LeBron James, Guggenheim Partners, Elizabeth Murdoch, Redbird, Nike, the owners of the Red Sox are all invested in this business that is valued at, or it was valued at $725 million, right, Chris? And let's talk about Maverick Carter for a second. He runs the business, if I'm not mistaken, and SpringHill employed Michael Barr, 200 people at one point. So, did they kind of lean in over their skis just a bit here? I mean, what happened?
Yeah, they did. And the business, to be fair, and I think Maverick said this in a statement, the business had changed dramatically since they really launched this. First of all, you had the pandemic, and then which froze up a lot of production. Then you had the twin strikes in Hollywood last year by actors and writers that also shut down production, and more importantly, sort of changed the business. The streaming companies, there was a huge boom trying to get the idea was going to create as much movies and TV shows as possible. That's going to lure people to the streaming services and never mind the profits. And I'm talking about companies like Disney, Warner Brothers, Netflix, Paramount, all spending a lot of money, NBC and Peacock, to just produce shows regardless of whether there was a payoff. And that changed with all that happened with the pandemic, the strikes, the Wall Street changed its opinion. It was no longer about just signing up subscribers for your streaming service. It was about actually showing profits. So we've seen this across the board in Hollywood, cutbacks in spending on new projects. And so SpringHill was caught up in that.
Well, which brings me to the next point. You talked about some of the projects. SpringHill, they just recently merged with Fullwell 73. And with that, because they are behind the Kardashians and then the Grammy Awards. So, I mean, this isn't like they merged with me and Michael Barr's favorite board games. I mean, we're talking some big projects here.
Yeah, well, they're both sort of companies in a similar position, relatively new companies in entertainment with some high-profile partners. And so, I mean, what's interesting is that their content is very different. The new company has done, James Corden's TV show, the Grammys, as you mentioned, that the Kardashians. These are kind of more long-lived projects in music and entertainment, where SpringHill's more focused, of course, on sports. And so they complement each other in that fashion. I think what this other company was able to deliver was a sort of a more diversified business. They did a lot of music videos. They did commercial work. And so Fullwell's got that kind of body of work that maybe they can help, stave off some of the slower times. In the business.
Well, Chris, in terms of content, what were they selling their investors on? And here's my question, right? I mean, you have Moana. I mean, what, $221 million in the U.S. and Canada during the holiday weekend, right? I mean, were they trying to make movies like Moana? Were they trying to build content and compete with Netflix and just crank stuff out? I mean, in sports, for example, LeBron James lends his name to the franchise. You think that they're trying to tell stories that haven't yet been told in the world of sports. But I'm just curious, what was their strategy here?
It was not entirely to be dependent on LeBron. I mean, they did some projects, the Space Jam, the reboot of the movie, Shooting Star. I think this is a LeBron bio for Peacock, but they were broader than that. But there was definitely a sports theme to it all, which makes sense. That's an area they know. You're probably not going to like hearing this, but sports has been a kind of an iffy business from the entertainment standpoint. There was we all know and love our sort of classic, sports movies, but they were never huge, right? Not like Moana or Moana 2. And so that business was one that Hollywood was generally sort of pulling away from, those kind of mid to small budget movies. And so they saw an opportunity, particularly to do this for streaming. There was also a bit, getting back to the whole bubble concept, there was a early success in sports docs, 30 for 30, ESPN, and of course, The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan one. And, when people saw the numbers that were in the awards were coming to shows like that, then everybody had to have one, right? And so then you have, I'm looking at the line of SpringHill shows. I mean, Black Ice, Res Ball, Hustle, the Adam Sandler movie for next week. I mean, these are all, worthy projects, but it's the kind of stuff that, Hollywood was kind of moving away from in general. So, and that there seemed to be a lot of, I mean, right now, the sports doc category is just sort of really blown up. And so that's, again, sort of the trap that SpringHill caught itself in.
I thought a show that they were involved in was a talk show called The Shop, and I thought that was going to get over big time. Has it been a asset for SpringHill?
I don't think any of these things have really popped to the degree they would have loved. All of the stuff is good. But it's just a very competitive world.
Yeah,
if you think about the competition, just to get that kind of one top spot on Netflix when you turn on your Netflix, and granted, if you're a sports fan and you watch these things, they're going to recommend them through the whole algorithm. But to get to that broader audience it's just a challenge, and so that's one of the things that all of these production companies are facing in this new streaming era.
I mean, Michael Barr, I got to say, I mean, it's such a challenging market, right? Netflix is eating everyone's lunch right now. I mean, my wife, she goes to it first. I mean, we haven't cut the cord yet, but we may as well. I mean, I'm starting to even, go over to the dark side.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to admit, now I am watching an old geezer Barr saying this, a lot of the streaming channels like Netflix and Max. I'm
Max
just,
too, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm deep into this. So I'm wondering if part of the problem also, Chris, is we're kind of in an unknown. We don't know where the market is going, and maybe why a lot of companies like LeBron James with SpringHill, where should they go?
Well, I think we're at a point now where things are starting to stabilize. So by putting themselves in this position where they have kind of a more diversified body of work and so they've got some new financing out of this merger, they'll be in a position to continue to make shows, the really good ones that they're doing, and maybe we've sort of hit bottom in terms of the big media companies cutting back on spending. We're definitely seeing a trend where, thanks to all these cutbacks, now Disney and Paramount and Warner Brothers, their streaming businesses are profitable.
You're just hitting the nail on the head, these streaming businesses. I mean, they had Warner Brothers, as one of their investors early on. I mean, and they aren't a streamer, right? I mean, it's all about the transmission of this content. So maybe that's the deal. Is that what's coming next? Is that what we can expect?
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt that, the future of how we watch entertainment is going to be on a streaming service.
Bloomberg's Chris Palmeri. We love you, man. Thanks for coming and joining us, buddy.
Anytime.
He is Bloomberg News Media and Entertainment Team Leader. Up next, we turn to Nike and Foot Locker and why they're joining forces again. For Damian Sassower, I'm Michael Barr. You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports, Bloomberg Radio around the world.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr, along with Damian Sassower. Scarlet Fu is on assignment.
Nike's hit on tough times lately, Michael Barr. They replaced CEO John Donahoe with veteran exec Elliott Hill in October.
And now we're learning a little more about what is the strategy going forward, including a new partnership with Foot Locker. To take us through the latest, we bring in Kim Bhasin. You are an old friend of the show. He covers celebrity and athlete business deals for Bloomberg News. Kim, welcome back to the Bloomberg Business of Sports.
Hello. Always so happy to be here.
Well, see, we talked about this several months ago when John Donahoe decided he was going to make these decisions and branch away from Foot Locker, and then Nike was going to do its thing and this and that, whatever. And finally they admitted not too long ago, maybe we didn't think this through.
Yeah, this whole thing started back in 2021. It really started when Mark Parker, the previous CEO, was in charge over there at Nike. They wanted to refocus their sales on Nike.com, the Nike apps, and lately sneakers and SN. How do you spell that? Sneaker? Is it sneakers with no vowels? That's their the hottest drops are up on that app that you keep getting an L on because you can never beat all the bots who are outbidding you. Okay, so that's what they were trying to do, and In 2021, they ramped it up a whole lot. They cut half of their retail partners out and just stopped sending these Nike shoes there. Foot Locker was affected by this too. Nike used to make up 75% of purchases at Foot Locker, and that went all the way down below 60% a couple years later.
So, Kim, talk to me a little bit about, who needs who more, right? I mean, I just saw Foot Locker slashed its full-year guidance after reporting a rough set of quarterly results. Is that a warning sign for Nike? I mean, does Nike even care? I mean, talk to us about this partnership. So, in inverted commas, I mean, what comes next?
Yeah, Foot Locker's been around for 50 years, and Nike's always been their most important partner. The thing is, it's the same the other way around. Foot Locker sells tons and tons and tons of Nike shoes. They're the most important channel for them, I suppose, besides their own, in the United States. So they've been a critical part of each other's sales. And these two companies have had problems in the past. Back in 2003, they had this feud over sneaker prices where Nike was pulling back some of their shoes over those prices, but they managed to work it out over time. And they've had partnerships in the past as well. The House of Hoops is a whole line of stores that Foot Locker opened that has exclusive Nike products in it, and that's been a long time tie-up for them. So lately, what they've been rolling out is something called Home Court.
Yeah.
This debuted.
Talk to us about Home Court. What is Home Court?
Yeah, Home Court debuted at the Foot Locker flagship here in New York. Over on 34th Street, across the street from the big old Macy's there.
Yeah.
And it's a basketball section that the Nike executives alongside Foot Locker developed together. But what's different this time is that Nike is allowing its competitors to be in there.
They're going to let New Balance in there?
New Balance is in there.
Adidas
in there. Adidas is in there as well.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty magnanimous.
Yeah, you got LaMelo Ball. I mean, LaMelo's in there. Anthony Edwards, his shoes are also in this section. Now, granted, okay, the big walls in there, they got a big Nike swoosh on it, and there's a whole bunch of LeBrons and Giannis's and everything, too.
Well, this is part because Mary Dillon, who is now the current chief executive officer of Foot Locker, she said, hey, the basketball culture is a really key part of our overall strategic history. She has now changed the direction from Donahoe.
Yeah, and with Nike's new CEO in place, Elliott Hill, who started just back in October, he had better relationships with retailers. He was a longtime Nike executive who retired and came all the way out of retirement to replace John Donahoe and take the lead at Nike. One of his big initiatives is to rebuild these relationships with retailers, not just Foot Locker, but across the board. And they brought in this guy, Tom Petty, out of retirement, even before Elliott came back. I love his
music.
Yeah.
I knew that was coming.
PGDIE. And he's been working on this as well. They've been hosting summits with the retailers to show what products are in the pipeline coming up in 2025 and things like that to increase transparency and work with them a little bit more.
Well, Kim, let's go there. I mean, we're spending so much time talking about the actual business of selling sneakers. We're not talking about what the content looks like, right? I mean, talk to us a little bit about what comes next for Nike. What's in the hop? Are there any interesting new designs? Any interesting, new things going on?
Actually, what you're trying to say, Damian, is if old man Barr wears some of the footwear, well, I look stupid.
No, you're good. Look, lifestyle sneakers have been decreasing in sales lately. It's been one of Nike's biggest problems. So the Air Force One, the Dunk, and the Jordan 1 were three enormous product lines and still are for Nike. But that has slowed significantly. Nike's also lagging in running, and they're trying to fix that as well. I went to an event that they hosted earlier this year in Paris where they unveiled the Pegasus Premium, which is a more expensive running shoe that's coming out sometime next year. The thing is, that's kind of all we know. Nike keeps this stuff under wraps so that they can debut these new new shoes in these big, surprising, fun ways. And I mean, the new CEO, Elliott Hill, has yet to outline a turnaround plan for Nike. It's only been a couple months. They postponed it at Investor Day to give him more time to work out that plan. But Nike does report earnings in December.
A Nike suede low top, cool, going out at night.
Now, I could get into that.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's what I'm looking for. I mean, that's but what do I know? I mean, but you're right. The Nike Field General, the Nike Kill Shot, all these kind of
Kill Shot.
Yeah, all these brands. But, I guess, for me, I'm just curious, like, is this really going to have a definitive impact on the bottom line, on shareholders, on the equity price? I mean, like, do we really think that just, repairing the relationship between Foot Locker and Nike is going to be meaningful in terms of the stock price? What are your thoughts there, Kim?
It's a piece of the puzzle, but they still need, they say it themselves, compelling product to keep shoppers coming back and wanting to wear Nikes everywhere. I mean, sneakers are everyday shoes now. We wear it to work. We wear these things everywhere. So that's what the bar is. It's got to be something that you want to wear all the time.
Or real performance. Like I could use a few inches on my my jump shot or something like that.
Well, you're good. Me. It's like,
I mean, get some insoles. Maybe it'll help you dunk.
Check that.
Have they?
Get up.
Have they thought? I don't want to slam John Donahoe, the previous CEO of Nike.
No, please do.
But you're about to.
But I'm about to. Yeah. I don't know. I never understood why would you get away from Foot Locker at the time when Foot Locker was one of your biggest partners to sell your product and then just go Nike.com.
Nike is kind of a kingmaker, right? They're the most important brand for most of these retailers who had been working with them. And the thought was the premiumization of how their brand is portrayed. And I heard, from sources that in a lot of ways, the Nike executives didn't like how Foot Locker was presenting the shoes. This new home court that you're seeing, if you look up a photo of this court, it's a beautiful space, right? It looks a lot nicer than just one big wall of shoes. And that's what happened with Nike. They're pulling out of discount stores and things like that. And they selected a few retailers to bring them forward, and that was JD Sports in Europe and Dick's Sporting Goods in the U.S. They felt like they had a really good presence in Dick's Sporting Goods, so they sent them more stuff instead. It just depended on who they selected as the winners here.
Okay, one last question. Is this all about sneakers, or what about wardrobe? What about clothing? I mean, are they working more? Are they trying to this new endeavor, this new collaboration between Nike and Foot Locker? Does it span all products, or is it really just focused on footwear?
This is focused on footwear, and Foot Locker overall is focused on footwear. But the apparel this past quarter did not perform nearly as well as the footwear business at Foot Locker, and it was a down quarter anyway. So, there's concerns around athletic apparel right now as well.
And before all this happened, before Donahoe was shown, hey, best luck in his retirement. That's what they,
best of luck in his retirement.
That was showing, what they were talking about with Mr. Donahoe. And again, I'm not slamming him because I can't even manage my checkbook, which shows you how old I am. Because first I'm going to a checkbook, and then but it happens.
I think it worked for a while, right? If I'm not mistaken, Kim, Nike's results were actually pretty strong for a while off the back of it. But then when they really needed to sell some inventory and they didn't have those relationships in place.
I really think when you look back on Donahoe's tenure at Nike, we'll see those first 2 years as being hugely successful for that company. But, flew too close to the sun there, and eventually.
Bloomberg's Kim Bhasin, thank you, my man, for again joining us on the Bloomberg Business of Sports. We appreciate it, man.
Anytime.
By the way, if you don't know who Kim Bhasin is, well, shame on you. He covers celebrity and athlete business deals for Bloomberg News. Sticking with those brands, Foot Locker released earnings this past week, and it disappointed traders. Shares sunk as much as 20% after the announcement. On the earnings call, Foot Locker CEO Mary Dillon talked about how partnering with Nike is a big part of Foot Locker's strategy going forward.
Stepping back, we feel really great about our partnership with Nike and our key areas of strategic focus together around basketball, sneaker culture, and kids. And, we've heard us talk about most recently the Clinic, which is a program in conjunction with Nike and Jordan Brand, as well as the Home Court, are just two good examples of that really coming to life through our Lace-Up plan. And, Elliot and his team I think, are absolutely taking the right actions for the brand and the overall marketplace, and very confident in their actions that'll benefit the Nike brand as well as our overall industry and partnership. So, and we continue as a brand, as a wholesaler, to make the right investments, we think, for our brand partners to showcase their brands and make us as the strongest omnichannel retailer that we can be.
That's Foot Locker CEO Mary Dillon speaking on the sneaker chain's earnings call after releasing results that sunk shares. Up next, we turn to college sports with Goulston and Storrs sports law practice co-chair Marty Edel. For Damian Sassower, I'm Michael Barr. You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
Thanks for joining us on the Bloomberg Business of Sports, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr, along with Damian Sassower. Scarlett Fu is on assignment. There's always a lot to go over in the world of college sports, with the rise of sports betting and NIL. And to help us break down some of the latest headlines, we welcome back an old friend of the show, Marty Edel. He's co-chair of Goulston and Storrs Sports Law Practice and adjunct professor of law at Columbia University. Welcome back to the Bloomberg Business of Sports, old friend.
Michael, so nice to be back with you and Damian today.
I'm going to start with I know we always bring this up, but where are we now with student athletes, students, or employees? What the heck are we in this arena here?
So let me use this 3 words to describe it. What a mess. Since we last spoke about this, there have been new developments. We've had the settlement provisionally approved in what was called the House case, which is an antitrust case that now has provisionally settled to pay student athletes approximately $2.8 billion, which will be funded by the NCAA and member conferences. To the member conferences will pick up now will pay approximately 22% of media revenues to student athletes. Scholarships no longer will be capped at prior numbers, so that schools can now offer scholarships in whole or in part to any number of student athletes. There are lots of other provisions to the House settlement, but the question here becomes, if you're paying student athletes a share of media revenue, if you're giving them grant in aids, tuition, room, and board, if you're allowing them to receive NIL dollars, name, image, and likeness, and what we know from a federal court in Tennessee earlier this year, you can now offer student athletes sign-on bonuses in order to enroll in schools and guarantee them NIL dollars. Are the student athletes really students? Or have we pushed the envelope over into making them employees? And what will this mean for schools? So those are the new developments since we last spoke, which raises that question.
Marty, I'm sitting here and, I've been, analyzing everything that's going on with President-elect Trump's, cabinet and his administration and, the spots that he's filling for it. And all my research and analysis, I haven't found really much on where he stands on NIL. And, the one thing I have seen is where he stands. If you look at his, website, he's got like this list of 20, things that he core promises. And one of them is keep men out of women's sports. So I imagine he's talking about transgender. And so what impact do you think Trump and a Trump administration might have on college sports?
So great question. Let me segue slightly to transgender and then come back to the issue that we were just discussing. On transgender sports, we know there's been a big push in the Biden administration to give lots of opportunities to transgender athletes to compete in a sport in their gender of choice. And there have been several decisions by federal courts saying that under the Equal Protection Amendment, transgender athletes ought to be able to choose. I suspect that the new Department of Education, for however long it lasts under Linda McMahon, if she's accepted as the nominee to head that department, they're going to rescind a lot of the Biden executive orders and Department of Education executive orders that permitted transgender athletes to compete. So there'll be a push to keep sports, men's sports as men's sports, women's sports as women's sports. Whether that will pass constitutional muster is a different question. With respect to college athletes as students or athletes, the president-elect has some involvement in sports. You may remember he was an owner of the now-defunct USFL, the United States Football League.
Tried to buy the Bills.
Right. And with the USFL, what I like telling my class at Columbia Law School is that he was part of a successful antitrust case against the NFL, for which he and the other owners in the USFL were awarded the grand sum of $1 in damages, which under our antitrust laws gets trebled. So he got $3. It seems, at least from some of his statements, that the president-elect seems to view athletes through the unidimensional view as being professionals. If they're professionals, that distinction between college and professional athletes will disappear even more quickly than it's been going at this point, and nothing will be done to impact that. The new head of the NCAA, Charlie Baker, he's not so new anymore. I've been told has been lobbying in Congress for various exemptions for the colleges and universities from some of our laws, the antitrust laws, some of the labor laws, to allow them to do the things that professional athletes do. This is going to create a phenomenal crisis in college sports and college education for schools outside the Power Five.
Well, Marty, here's where my question comes down to, right? I mean, you mentioning the Wild West, of which that's where we are, right? Because nobody can agree, lawmakers can't agree, be it the House, the Senate, the President, et cetera, on where and how to, regulate the payments that are going to student athletes. But, if you just look at some of, Trump's other policies, right? Easier financial sector regulations, and you read through that into, I guess, the business of college sports, because it is a business, maybe he's just going to leave the status quo as is. I mean, is that possible?
Sure, you can let the marketplace work things out, which is the general philosophy of the president-elect. How it will work it out, this is something that I know we have discussed a little bit in the past, which is what role will colleges take on in this new environment? For example, let's take Vanderbilt. It's in the SEC.
It's my alumni. I'm an alumnus. Okay, please. No.
Okay, so
let's go through this.
And congratulations on your victory over Alabama.
Anchor down, my friend. Anchor down.
Oh, man.
But if we get past that part, Vanderbilt has a reckoning to be made. I think it's the only private university in the SEC. Mm. If the schools go towards the position of student athletes as employees, the National Labor Relations Board can step in and, as they have with Dartmouth, for example, and recognize bargaining units. That will not apply to the state schools because state employees are exempt from the strictures of the National Labor Relations Act. So right away you have an unequal or uneven playing field between Vanderbilt and its competitors in the SEC. its competitors in the SEC seem to have a lot more money that they are throwing at prospective athletes. That is, athletes who are coming in either as freshmen or as portal athletes transferring from other schools. I mean, if you promise somebody over $1 million, it's hard to turn it down. In fact, you may find some of these athletes deciding they don't want to go pro because they may have to take a cut in pay to turn pro. There used to be, by way of history, there used to be a reference to athletes who went from school to school playing week to week as, quote, tramp athletes, close quote. That's from the 1870s when athletes were paid to play for whoever wanted to pay them the most. That is likely to happen. How will Vanderbilt compete in that environment? Or does it want to compete in that environment? Maybe it reaffirms its commitment to being a school of higher learning.
2 words for you, Michael Barr: Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler is a Vandy alumni. You know, I mean, there's not many of us out there. Football, I'm talking. Just one last question for you here, Marty. We had Adam Greenblatt, CEO of BetMGM, on not long ago, and, he was talking about Missouri. Missouri and Alberta, Canada. He's talking about sports gambling and where it's being legalized. I mean, what can we expect on the sports gambling front? Is there any interesting developments on that side?
Well, there are a couple of interesting developments, and we've seen penalties at the professional level tossed down for, Jonte Porter and a couple of players in baseball and a bunch of players in professional football for engaging in gambling. And this is both what we call prop betting as well as regular betting. I mean, can you imagine now players betting on individual statistics? You're back to an era that college sports thought they got rid of from the 1950s, where a player might not score a basket at the end of the game in order to make the spread. There has to be ways of regulating it. I think the professional leagues, from what I understand, have vigorous investigative units, and that's how they can ferret out who gambles, whether that person is passing on tips to friends and family. And the leagues, though, have different rules. The NBA, for example, prohibits any player, and I think it's players, coaches, owners, personnel, and family from placing a bet on any professional sports contest. I think the NFL, and I'm not 100% sure of this, limits it to NFL games. And, of course, college sports is entering this field and trying to figure out what to do while players are engaging in sports betting. FanDuels and DraftKings is a huge phenomenon in this country and a big moneymaker. How do you tell a college student you can't engage in FanDuels, and we're going to have some secret means of checking your computer to see that you're not doing it when his roommate or her roommate is doing the same thing? Colleges aren't as advanced as the pros in trying to deal with the issue of sports betting.
Our thanks to Marty Edel for joining us. He is co-chair at Goulston and Storrs Sports Law Practice and adjunct professor of law at Columbia University. And that does it for this edition of the Bloomberg Business of Sports. For Damian Sassower, I'm Michael Barr. Thank you for joining us. Tune in again next week for the latest on the stories moving big old money in the world of sports. You're listening to Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world. And don't forget to catch our podcast on all your podcast platforms.